Before we unlock this episode, I have to talk to you about the pleasure pods. If you know me, you know that I love teaching about slow sex and I love teaching about taking time to really feel each other's bodies. The pleasure pods is such a great product for that. Not only can you take these gorgeous little pods and melt them in the microwave to make it a massage oil, and you can massage your partner with that. You can also transition that safely into genital play, so this can be a lubricant. And then also, because it's food grade safe, you don't have to do any cleanup or transition of product if you are kind of down for some oral play. And not to mention, if you're going through perimenopause or menopause and those 15 years of maybe some vaginal dryness, the moisture that you're going to get from the pleasure pods is just above and beyond anything that you're ever going to experience. All we do is we crack this into little tiny pieces, insert when we feel like we need a little extra moisture and a little extra love down there, and go about your day. This is such an amazing all-in-one product. You have to try them out for yourself. You can find these now at Pure Pharmacy in British Columbia, at thepleasurepods.com, or Amazon Canada. Welcome to the Intimacy Unlocked podcast. I'm Serena Haynes, your everything to do with sex coach, and I'm here to answer all of your juiciest sex questions. Hey lovers, welcome back to Intimacy Unlocked. I'm Serena Haynes, your everything to do with sex coach, and we're going to get into it this week. We are focusing on kinks and fetishes this week. We got a lot of questions come in, and I've actually had this come up a lot with me this week, and I'm kind of hesitating to tell a bit of a personal story, but I'm going to in a little while as well. But I think let's just get into some questions and see what you guys are asking first. And then we're going to get into what it feels like to, we always talk about kinks and fetishes like they're always going to be these really fun things. But sometimes when we can't have that need or that desire fulfilled, it's a really tough place to be. So a lot of the questions that came in this week were about maybe not getting your desires fulfilled and how to. So I'm going to put on my old lady readers here, and we're going to get into these questions. So question number 1 was, can you explain the difference between a kink and a fetish? Because I've always had an attraction to feet, but I don't necessarily need feet to orgasm. I feel like I have a foot fetish because I'm constantly looking at women's feet, and not all of them turn me on. Thanks. Like, well, okay, so no, I don't think you have a foot fetish. I think that you have a kink towards feet, which is totally fine, and it's completely different. So what's the difference between a kink and a fetish? This is a big question that we get a lot, right? We hear how many times we hear, oh, so-and-so has a foot fetish, so-and-so has a elbow fetish, but it's not really. It's just kind of like this kinky thing that you really like. So a kink is something that we, out of the ordinary, out of your ordinary, okay, which is the other nuance to this, that you like to bring in for novelty and play and fun. It's something that kind of gets your motor running. It's something that you find maybe a little taboo, maybe a little risque, whatever that is, but it's just a fun thing that you choose to bring in to your sex life sometimes. And sometimes maybe it doesn't exist there, and that's an okay thing. A fetish, on the other hand, is something that is necessary for your arousal. So that's like if somebody did have a foot fetish, they would have to have a visual of feet or touching of feet or feet in the periphery or something in order for their body to actually experience any sort of sexual arousal. So that's the difference. So you can kind of think a kink is something that I choose to bring into my life just for a little bit of fun, and a fetish is something that may choose to come into my life, and then I have to figure out how to navigate that, right? So some people with fetishes will find it quite difficult and struggle quite a bit, especially if it's something that they deem that society would think was really unconventional and that they would be afraid to bring up with a partner. I mean, and it could be anything. It literally, like I'm holding my glasses in my hand. Like it literally could be, I have a fetish for eyeglasses. And in order for me to have, an erection or get, my clit aroused or any sort of orgasm at all, I need my partner to be wearing eyeglasses. And that's how it needs to happen. And that's a really hard thing to go to your partner who doesn't wear eyeglasses and be like, hey baby, can you put these glasses on or I'm not going to be able to come. Like that doesn't feel really good to say to people sometimes when you have a lot of shame around that. So finding different ways to incorporate your fetish, if that's what it is, can be you can feel a little more distraught in that. And then when it comes to our kinks, there are some things that we really, really love. Like we really, really love them. And we might even form a bit of an identity around our kinks, which is okay too. But if it wasn't there, you could still be aroused. So to answer this question, I don't think you have a foot fetish at all, but you find yourself constantly looking at women's feet, but not all of them turn you on. So you just enjoy feet, right? Some people enjoy hair. Some people enjoy knees and elbows. The weenus and the vagina. Do you guys know what a weenus is? Apparently the weenus is the outside of your elbow, the little skin on the outside of your elbow, and the vagina is the inside. Now that's according to Wikipedia. I mean, like, don't be coming at me for that one. But anyway, it's just a fun thing. And my kids used to love to say weenus all the time, and I would get mad at them because they would say it like in the grocery store, and I thought they were doing something inappropriate, but they were like, no, ma'am, it's the elbow. Anyways. Okay, the next question is having a fetish something that is unhealthy or be ashamed of? And the answer is no, it is not. This is the tough thing. So I just touched on this just a little bit when it came to kink versus fetish, is that sometimes your fetishes, they create this space in your life where you feel a lot of shame because maybe it feels like it's taking over your life a little bit. It can. Right? And it doesn't always have to. You can have a fetish that, you know exactly where it's going to show up and exactly what's going to happen. And, you have that control over, we have control over everything. We can have control over everything. When we feel like that's out of control, that's sometimes where that shame comes from, alongside the societal scripts that we're not supposed to like anything unconventional or not vanilla, quote vanilla. But if you do find that it's actually a barrier to you talking to a partner or, having your sexual arousal, or maybe your partner feels like there's something wrong with them because they can't help you with this fetish, things like that can kind of exasperate that shame a little bit. But no, the only way that I would say that your fetish or anything could be unhealthy, if it disrupts your day-to-day life, if it gets in the way of relationships, if it gets in the way of your job or your work or your nutrition, your eating, if it stresses your body out in such a way that you have to adapt to that stress, that could be anything, right, guys? Like, it doesn't have to just be a fetish. It lands in the same category as, going to the gym too often could hurt your body. And if then you choose to keep going back to the gym, even when you have an injury, then that's getting in the way of your daily life, and that's still unhealthy. So it's the same category as that. It doesn't mean that the fetish itself is the unhealthy thing. It's how you are managing it in your life that can be healthy or unhealthy. And the shame that comes around with that, we can think all kinds of narratives and scripts and things out there in the world that say that you're supposed to like things one way, a certain way, and that only way. And if you like something completely different, then there has to be something wrong with you. And that's not the case at all. It really is just different. And like, we need all kinds of colors of the rainbow, for things to work. I mean, you may have a kink or a fetish or something and meet somebody who doesn't think that they do at all, and you get to introduce them to something. So I like to look at it as curiosity and a lot of fun, a good way to play. The next one is how to navigate talking about kinks with your partner. How should I tell them about it? And what if we try something and one person doesn't like it? How do we handle that? So, really calmly and out of the bedroom. Okay. So, Emily Morse always talks about tone, timing, and something else. It's the 3 T's and I can't remember what they are. But the bottom line is don't do it in the bedroom and don't do it over supper with the kids and don't do it maybe in the grocery store. Like, choose your time and choose your space and sit with your partner and say, hey, you know what? There's something I've wanted to talk to you about. There's something that maybe has come up for me in the past little while, or maybe it's been there forever. And I haven't really wanted to say anything because I kind of feel a little weird about it, but I'd love to sit down and have some curiosity with you about this conversation. Have you ever thought of blah, 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 right? I've sometimes fantasized about fill in the blank. I'm wondering how you feel about that. Now, this is never pressure filled, right? It's never, I want to do this. Like, this is what I'm fantasizing about, so we need to try this on Wednesday. It's more like, this is what I fantasize about. This is kind of what I think about. This is the porn that I really like. This is, something that I did when I was such and such an age, and I've never really tried it since, but I'd really love to kind of try it with you. How do you feel about that? Like, what do you think about it? And then have a back and forth with curiosity, because your partner could say something like, I'm not really into that kind of stuff. Like, I don't really like it. And you just say, okay, but then start being curious to them and let them know that I'm going to ask you some questions about that. And it's not because I'm trying to convince you to change your mind, but I'm just curious where your mindset is. So why don't you think that you would be interested in something like that? Because, sometimes when we talk to our partners like that, we'll find out that either they had maybe a bad experience, maybe they tried it and somebody shamed them, which is very likely. Maybe it's something to do with their religious background or their cultural upbringing, or just the way that they grew up, and jokes and, picking fun at other people, kind of like bullying other people at their expense, but then sitting back and going, oh, damn, like I like that. Like, I think about that too. And then we kind of bottle things up and we push them down. So you want to be really curious. And if you're the partner who has somebody coming to you, asking you about different fantasies and asking you about different kinks and, trying to maybe expose you to some fun novelty and some fun play, what you may end up feeling is some pressure to either get into it or defensiveness and being like, no, you wanted to do that with somebody else, or where did this come from, or how come this is just coming up right now, and what's wrong with the sex that we're having right now, why am I not good enough? So sit in that curiosity instead of the defensiveness behind it, because your partner is probably sharing something really vulnerable with you that maybe they didn't feel that super comfortable sharing with you. And in that moment, we're going to create pathways of how vulnerabilities are shared going forward. So if somebody comes to us with a vulnerability and we shut them down with defensiveness right away, you can rest assured that there's a little tiny part of their body that just went chink, chink and closed down. And now maybe that they're not going to come and talk to you about that again. So make sure that we're having these open dialogues. And if something does make you uncomfortable, say, you know what, babe, listen, I really appreciate that you shared that with me. And that's totally cool. And maybe another time, but like right now it's making me feel a certain way and I'm not really quite sure why. Maybe I need to sit with that for a minute. Okay. So there's lots of different ways to have those conversations. How soon should I tell a partner about them? So I think that if you have a kink that, no, you know what? Let's start with fetishes first. If you have a fetish and you know it's a fetish, now that we've had this conversation, and you know it's not just a kink, and you're dating somebody, okay? You're getting to know them, and you know deep in your heart, maybe from past experience, maybe just because you know who you are and it's part of your identity, that this is going to be really important to share, because if my partner is not into it, then this relationship cannot go any farther, unfortunately, and you're willing to accept that because that's just the accountability part of it, then you should probably bring that up as soon as you guys start feeling comfortable talking about your likes and your dislikes when it comes to sex, because that's a big conversation to have with people when you're dating. And, you know, some people are like, oh, I don't want to talk about sex on a date. They're going to think that I'm this and they're going to think that I'm that. And I go, do you know what's the worse than them thinking that is dating somebody for 2 months maybe, or maybe a month, and going out with them 5 or 6 times and then getting in the sack and finding out that they want you to like wear a clown mask to bed or they can't come. Like, you need to know that today. Junior, like, sorry, but you need to know that now, right? So put aside the, you know, society tells you I'm not supposed to talk about sex on the first date. Okay, maybe not the first date. Maybe you want to find out if you guys both like nachos first, but like soon into it, if it's a fetish, you need to have that conversation. Do not waste your time and do not waste this other person's time if it's something that they are not willing to participate in with you. I think even if it's a conversation of like, I don't like it, I don't do it, but I'm okay with you liking it, and let's find ways to navigate around that, cool. But we can't just slap them in the face with it. Like, after maybe you've slept with them. I mean, like that's just, I just don't feel like that's probably the most appropriate thing. So a fetish, I think that the conversation should come up. Maybe it doesn't have to be like your deepest, darkest, but it has to be like, listen, I'm into some stuff and that stuff is pretty important to me. And I'm just wondering how you feel about, unconventional ways of having sex or relating or, novelties and things like that, because I really need to talk to you about something serious. Now, if it's a kink that you kind of like, and, you've kind of gone in relationships, you haven't had it before, and sometimes you have had it and whatever, you know what? You can probably wait a little while to have that conversation, find out if you guys are really compatible with each other. It really isn't it's not a deal breaker for you in any way, unless it is. But, usually a kink is not necessarily a deal breaker. Now, there are nuances to that where sometimes our kinks are not fetishes, but they are also a really deep part of our identity. So that's the nuance there. So I'm kind of talking a little binary in my language right now where like fetish is the biggest and then kink is like not so, like it's kind of not as, I don't want to say not as important, but it's like a smaller level. But in the middle of that, there's a huge scale of how important things are and why they are to people. So I'll get into that in a minute. So if it's a kink, maybe just wait a little while and, kind of see if you're even compatible at all, and then have that conversation with them and then bring it up. Hey, I would love to put your hands above your head tonight, if that would feel good to you, and see what happens. Maybe you get like some rope or like some tape and you kind of hold it up and you're like, how would you feel if I like tied you to the bed tonight and like kissed every inch of your body? I don't know. I think most of us would probably say yes. Maybe not all of us. I know there's reasons why we wouldn't, but that could be a fun little kinky thing to do. So have those conversations pretty soon into it. What's next? Okay, I'm into much kinkier things when having sex with my partner. She really just loves being a mom and having baby making sex. Yeah, so that's okay. Maybe, again, just experience tells me when people talk about, baby making sex, maybe you're in that stage of life. Maybe that's the stage of life she's in. Maybe she is trying to be a mama, maybe she wants to do that. I'm assuming that it's baby making sex like you actually mean trying to make the babies, so maybe that's just the stage that your relationship is in right now. And what I want to say to you from experience is, and not personal experience, but from an outsider in my life experience that I've noticed actually quite recently, is just give her a minute. Just give her a minute to come back around if she was ever there to begin with, or maybe give her a minute to just like settle into being in this stage of life that maybe she's choosing and really wants. And maybe she can't compartmentalize that. Maybe it is baby making sex for now, but in a little while, maybe it won't be. And if it's something that you're missing because it used to be a certain way and it's not anymore, have that conversation with her and just say, what, baby, look, there's no pressure to get back to the way that things were. But, after all of, this beautiful family making that we're doing and the love making that we're doing, I just want you to know that deep down, I still really desire you as an erotic woman. Like I remember you that way and I miss you. And I really would like to have that with you at some point again. I just never want you to think that I've forgotten what that felt like with you and just how sexy I think you are and how amazingly gorgeous you are and just how I just want to ravish you all the time. And just let her know that that's still part of her identity if it ever was. So that she doesn't, because during motherhood, we lose a lot of the identity of who we were just as a human. We become so-and-so's mom and so-and-so's wife and so-and-so's something else. And we were not really identified as ourselves anymore. And again, society's told us that, as a mother, we're not supposed to be erotic because that means we're a slut. And sluts and moms can't exist at the same time. But guess what? Yeah, they can. And it can be amazing. But, ironically enough then, like once we can't have the babies anymore, now all of a sudden, what are we? MILFs. Jesus Christ. Can society just make up their minds? Like, do you want us to be sexy MILFs or do you not want us to be sexy MILFs? Because I think we should just all be sexy MILFs. I think that would just be super fun. Anyways, hopefully she comes back. Okay. But you have to stoke the flames of that eroticism and that fire, even if you have to be the one and it happening one-sided for just a little while. And then hopefully you'll be able to have the conversation. She can come back to you and say, you know what, baby, I really miss you too. I really miss the way that we had sex like that, or I really miss the way that we used to adventure or play or explore or have novelty, but I'm just really busy right now. My head is, full of whatever. So this is the way these conversations need to happen. It's just recognizing and acknowledging that maybe that is part of who we still are, but we just can't get there today. So the next question is, it's been hard to get over the quote vanilla hump with my partner. They have about a quarter of the experience I do, and I want more. There have been some flashes in the past in regards to kinks and toys, etc., but she's very reserved sexually. How can I open her up as well as the floodgates? Okay, so slowly and with time and with flattery and with compliments, sir. Listen, I'm going to make a real big statement right now. And anyways, we don't get canceled for this one, I hope. Every woman wants to be a slut, okay? We want it. We want sex. I mean it that way. Women want to feel their most erotic, alive selves. We want to have the greatest sex. We want to have the orgasm. We want to have the orgasms. We want to let go of all of these societal scripts and narratives and who we are and what we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to show up and all of these Madonna, visuals and ideals of what a woman is. We want to let go of those, but it doesn't feel safe. And when it doesn't feel safe, a woman cannot get into the depths and the bellow of her erotic self, okay? And that doesn't mean she doesn't feel safe with you, in your partnership, in your home, with her group of friends. It's such a larger concept of this DNA in her body that says to her, if you go outside of the norm of what a quote good woman is, you will be bad, shamed, stoned, and left because you are no good. Those are the things that exist inside of our bodies. And you ask any woman who does have an erotic aliveness to her, it probably wasn't like that all the time. She probably had to do a lot of deep, dark self-work in order to allow that part of herself to come to the surface and actually participate with you in that way. Now, does that mean that it's like deep shadow work that she does by herself in meditation? No, it can be that she has a beautiful partner who sees the potential, who has patience and trust in her and themselves, and takes it slow and uses words of affirmation and allows her space to open up a little bit. And maybe, like in this, it says we've seen a couple of little flashes. So maybe now in those little flashes that you see, you need to praise her 11 times more than the thing that she did. It's actually a concept that we use in parenting as well, where one negative thing that you say to a child, you actually need to counter that with 11 positive qualities that they have in order to help dissipate that negative feeling they have of themselves inside. It's the same idea. If you are with your partner this is a heterosexual question. So if you're with your partner who's a woman and you're the man in the relationship and you're sitting and maybe, I don't know, it could be something as simple as switching up the position. Okay, maybe she never wanted to do doggy because it just felt so crass and so, like rough. And she did. Afterwards, or even during, you say, oh my God, baby, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to do that. Thank you for putting yourself out there like that. You did such a good job. You were such a good girl. Some people love that. Some people don't. You're so good at this. I'm so happy that you allowed me the chance to be with you in that way. I know it couldn't have been easy for you, right? I loved the way you blah, blah, blah. I loved the way you taste. I loved the way you smelled. I love, the noise that you made. I love how relaxed you looked in that moment. Just things like that are just going to really push that a little bit forward. It takes a very patient partner to help a woman kind of come out of her shell that way, if that's the choice that you make. If that's the journey and the path that you choose to be on together. Sometimes. I mean, sometimes it could be like one slap on the ass and next thing the floodgates are open, right? Like you just don't know. But if it is going to be tough, then it's just a slow burn. No pressure, right? Nothing like, okay, well, we did that last time, so now we've got to double down the next time. No. You just kind of take it at her pace. Encourage and suggest things, especially if it's something that you're into a little bit more than she might be, or if it's not a she, whatever. But this question was, but like if you're into something that your partner's not into as much as you are, encourage and suggest and be curious. And then if it's something that like you love, let's say you want to, spank your partner with a leather belt. Okay. That's painful. That's a lot. That's something, right? So maybe that's where your head goes because now you've been thinking about it forever. So you know exactly what you want, but you got to scale that back, right? You got to go back to step one. What was step one? Step one was maybe just a little tap with your hand, right? We start with the hand. We start with a little spank. Maybe it's not even a spank, and maybe the quote impact that you're feeling is just holding their hands down or pushing them down to the bed. Like if I don't know, let's say you're in doggy and you're thinking to yourself, I just want to spank their ass. Like just put your hand on their ass and squeeze it, right? Like just give them a little taste of what it is that you really want. And then you can say to them afterwards or during, oh, I just love having your ass in my hands like that. I love the way that felt. I loved seeing how red your ass got when I grabbed it that way. Just little things like that make them feel really safe in allowing themselves to want to be curious and expand that kink just a little bit more. So now on that for a second, I want to kind of like toss out this BDSM, okay? Because people come to me all the time and we talk about kinks and fetishes, and then people are like, well, what is BDSM? And for some of us, it's a really easy answer. And I'm not going to lie, being in the world that I'm in, sometimes I forget that there are going to be people listening and people who are going to have questions about words that I use, like impact and dominance and, masochism and things like that. So let's expand on just what BDSM is for a second. So BDSM is an acronym for a lot of the play and a lot of the adventures that we have in our kinky worlds. So your kinks, like I mentioned earlier, your kink could be something just a little bit outside of your norm. So if you always have sex in the bed, but today you had sex on the kitchen counter, you're kinky. Congratulations. If you normally only feel comfortable under the sheets with the lights off, but you left the lights on this time and maybe pull the sheets down, guess what? You're feeling a little kinky today. I want everybody to kind of appreciate that you do have a little kink inside of you. It just depends on what it is. But then when we talk about BDSM, people get a little scared because they're like, oh, God damn, like I'm not into any of that. So let's go through it. So B is for bondage. Bondage can be anything from tying with ropes. It could be suspension. It could be chains and stuff, or it could be a hand around your wrist, holding your hand down. Okay. It can be blindfolding. It's just the bondage of your sight. Okay. So it doesn't actually have to be physically holding your body down. It can be just taking one of your sense away, right? So that could be a part of bondage. So the D in BDSM is for dominance. And that doesn't necessarily have to be physical either. It can be mental as well. So there are a lot of people who play with dominance in their relationships, and it has nothing to do with the physical act of holding anybody down or doing anything or being bigger than, right? You ask a lot of people who, practice and play, sometimes like they're dominant or their person or the way that they play, it has nothing to do with that, physical aspect of it. It has a lot more to do with the mental play and the mentality that you have in that relationship. So, to the most extreme, it can be, you have a person in your life who is your dominant, who, requires certain things of you, and there's protocols. And then if you, don't do those protocols or those tasks, then there's punishments and there's all kinds of stuff. On the very other end of that, for beginners, it can be something as simple as, being in bed with your partner and your partner saying something like, turn around, I'm going to do doggy style. Okay. I think a lot of us have heard that, or lie down, I'm getting on top now. Or, I'm getting on my knees, sit down, I'm going to suck your dick. anything like that can be a form of dominance, so it doesn't have to be this massive thing. It's just you kind of taking control in the moment. And then, the mental side of it can be more like telling your partner something that you expect them to do, either tasks or just a way that they're to present themselves. A lot of the time, I like to start couples off with not necessarily what you need to wear, but this is what I would like you to wear. So when I come home today from work, I'd like you to have on those jeans with that blue top and blah, 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 right? And all that is you guys are going to have supper, but your partner has told you what to put on and you're going to do that. And then once you've done that task, then your partner says, good job, like you did a really good job today. Thank you for doing that. And so that's just kind of like a little start to that. I could go on about dominance, so I will move on. The S is for submission, which is the other side of dominance, and sadism. So let's start with the submission part of it. Submission is the opposite of the dominance, the person receiving most of the time. But again, a lot of nuances, because many people think that the submissive in any sort of power control relationship is the one who is subservient. And that's not necessarily the case at all. Now, I will say there are some relationships, and then that's totally fine. That's the relationship, but they've decided on that. So again, like there's no non-consensual, submissive behavior. Like it's submissive, but it's consensual. But generally speaking, the submissive is the one who kind of controls what's happening, because we have safe words and we have, things that we're willing to do. We have things that we are not willing to do. So we have, a hard limit. Maybe we have a soft limit, and there's all kinds of stuff in between, things that maybe we would want to try, not today, but maybe bring it up again another day. And then there are things that are like, no, never bring that up again. I said no, and I will only do that if I come to you and I say that I would like to try this again. So the submissive in that relationship is the one receiving most of the tasks, receiving all of those things, but it's a consensual power dynamic. And it's one that, as a submissive, you want that to be done to you, right? So I don't know if today is the day to get into like setting scenes and talking about what that looks like and having contracts and doing all that kind of stuff. But the idea is that you have somebody who is going to be, quote, controlling is what I was going to say, but kind of managing and navigating what's happening, and the other person who is receiving that navigation. Okay. And then there's sadism. So, sadism is when you like to hurt or impact some sort of pain on another person in some way. Okay. So again, like I hesitate because it doesn't always have to be physical, right? It doesn't have to be physical. It's just that it's this mental thing where you're like, I really get off seeing my partner struggle with something, right? And that struggle is consensual still. So like, we got to keep saying this out loud. This is not just like a dick doing dick things to you. That's, they don't get to call themselves dominant and practicing BDSM if you haven't sat back and said, I really love when you do this to me. And that brings us to the M, the masochist. The masochist is a person who wants these things done to them, who enjoys it to the level that they enjoy it, to the level that it's consensual. And these are conversations that are had between people. It's not just your partner coming up to you and just being an absolute asshole to you and being like, oh, well, that's it. I'm a sadist. No, you get to choose if you want to be in that relationship. It's a back and forth, right? But that's just the person who wants to give whatever that pain is, mentally, physically, whatever that is, to watch their partner in that situation. And then the masochist is the one who wants to receive it and see themselves in that. And then as well, if we really want to get into it, they want to see the joy on their partner's face when they are receiving as well. So there's a lot of that involved. So there's this really fun little test that you can do online, and Sarah and I have actually both done it in our past. And it changes all the time, which is always super fun, but it's so simple. It's the BDSMtest.org. So go there, not sponsored, could be, not sponsored, could be, but go to BDSM.org. You can take a long version, and I believe that's a pay version, or you can take the shorter version and kind of figure out where you land on that. So I think that the last time I took it, I probably scored the highest on submission. And then I would say there was like a good bit of brat in there for me, and like rope bunny and a couple of other things like that. Like I'm not into like really, really heavy things. And I'm certainly not, and I know I'm a switch. I do know I'm a switch, but only in certain aspects. So a switch would be somebody who kind of oscillates between dominance and submission. But, I identify as a submissive, but when I'm in play with a partner, I get off on kind of switching up. But to me, it's because I'm pretending to be all dominant, and like, that's the fun part for me. So it's not really that I don't know. It's a funny question because I don't know if I actually enjoy the dominance of it or if I just enjoy the brattiness of pretending that I'm being dominant, right? So just like kind of topping from the bottom just to kind of piss them off and be like, what are you going to do now? So that you can have a lot of fun with this stuff. It comes off so serious, and it really is, because there's so many things that we need to think about with consent and the way we have these conversations, but it's not set in stone, right? It's not script. You get to create these relationships and this fun all on your own. Like, you don't have to fall into any of the boxes that I talked about. I can oscillate between God only knows what when I'm in play. It just kind of depends on my mood and maybe how my shower went that day. And do I feel soft and smooth, or do I feel like I want to rough you up a little bit? I don't know. We're going to see when we get into it, consensually, of course. So that's going to bring us into a bit of a heavier concept. Consensual non-consent is something that I think we should be talking about, and I'm not talking about it a lot right now because I'm giving you a chance for anybody who really doesn't want to have this conversation to maybe fast forward or shut off and have this conversation. So if you know what CNC is, or consensual non-consent, and that's something that you don't want to listen to, I'd suggest maybe fast forwarding a little bit. But if you do and you are curious, we're going to talk about it in a little bit of a different way. The consensual non-consent is basically this idea that, so a minute ago when I said like you're dominant and you're submissive, you kind of have control and there's like a scene set out and you have understandings and you know what's going to happen. Consensual non-consent is basically that you don't know what's going to happen. Okay, so I'm going to simplify it a little bit just for people listening who might not understand everything, but it's generally relatively violent or harsh. Okay, it's like chasing down prey. It's like prey and predator. Okay, it's you don't know when it's coming. If I participated in CNC, let me give you an example. Examples always work well. If I was participating in CNC with a partner and that was an agreement that we had, okay, so it's consensual, I could be walking home from work on any random day and something could happen to me. Something like, somebody comes up and, blindfolds me or throws a bag over my head or kidnaps me or breaks into my house or like really actually creates fear in my body, and then proceeds to do things to me that in most cases would not be considered a loving act at all. Okay. Some sort of violation, some sort of, aggressiveness. Now, again, I'm being really mindful of my words in case you are still listening, but I want you to understand that this is not something for the faint of heart, and it's not something that we practice, with our blind date. Like, that's not how this works. It's a really deep relationship that you're going to have with somebody. But I have people come to me all the time and they say, I want to practice this kind of consensual non-consent. They're also called rape fantasies. Okay. But I don't want it to be as violent. I love the feeling of the fear behind it, that, but that I know what's going on, that I'm trusting that my partner has my best wishes at heart, but that it's also this little bit of violence. It's also this little bit of healing for me. A lot of people use this for trauma healing and things like that. Again, not getting into in the moment. But how can I do it in a less violent way, or maybe dip my toe in? Okay. So I did have to write these things down because I really didn't want to mess this up, because it's such a heavy concept for me. And I do take it really, really seriously. So a couple of things that I was thinking, you could do something like the sleepy scene, or like pretend you're asleep play, where you're in bed with your partner. Maybe they're not breaking into your house, but you're in bed. Maybe they're out watching the game. And while you're asleep, either for real, if you've actually given the go ahead, or you're pretending, that then they are able to come in and just do whatever they want to your body without asking verbally in that moment, because you've already consented to your non-consent. So you could practice it that way. So that doesn't have to be, as violent. So what you want to make sure is that you discuss it in detail, but what's allowed and what isn't. These are all things that happen before this play ever exists. Like you have to use a code word or a body signal in case of discomfort. We usually call those like safe words, but sometimes we can't get a word out, especially if we're doing things that require like a hand over our mouths, or like a head in a pillow, or there's something like that. Sometimes we can't say that word. So you want to make sure that you have some sort of hand signal or body movement or something, right? That's happening. There are some people that I have that actually hold clickers in their hands. And when it's time to stop, they just start clicking their clicker, and their dominant knows that it's time to end the play right away. So that's just the way that goes on. So, this can play with the helplessness of it and like the surrender, and a little bit of the fear, but it's kind of low stake, right? You're in a safe environment. You're in a safe place. You know where you are and what's going on. And, you might have heard the game on before he snuck in, or they snuck in. So, it's a bit of an easier way. Resistance role play with a light pushback, right? So again, we have our safe words in place because a lot of the time a no or don't or stop, they kind of slip out. But a safe word is a word that you never really would say like that. So some people just say silly things like, I don't know, the quintessential one is pineapple, right? Or, Hercules or whatever. It could be anything. It could be Volvo, not vulva or vulva. But anyway, it literally could be anything that's not stop, don't, no, I don't want to, all of those classic words. So another decent way to kind of ease yourself in is just resistance play, where you do say those words and you say them out loud. So you're pushing back against your partner who's doing something to you. And you're like, no, stop. I don't want to, get off me. And all of the words that you normally would say, but they know full well that they're not your safe word, and that this play will only stop when they say, like when you say pineapple, for example. You want to be clear on which kinds of no are part of the play and which ones are serious, right? Again, this goes to your safe word, but some people will say, I do want to say no or stop. So you might just want to tell your partner, stop actually means stop, and other than that, you're good to go. And this works because it plays with your dominance and your surrender, but it also keeps the tone kind of light and safe. You're pushing back, you're getting that physicality that you require, that you desire. You're also getting, the aggressiveness from your partner that you're desiring, but that you have control over that. Scripted scenes, right? With an out of control scene kind of thing. So a lot of the time when we go into our partnered play in BDSM, we do, and I touched on this earlier, but we have scripted scenes, like we have play scenes, and we say, this is what's going to happen. This is what I would like to happen. This is what I would like to happen. You go back and forth. So as a submissive, I'll give you an example. And I would say something like, I'm really craving being told what to do tonight. I also would really like a little degradation. I want to be told, instead of telling me I'm a good girl, I want you to tell me how bad I'm doing at these things. And once I push back, I would like some impact play in order to, quote, put me in my place, right? So this is how things work. And these are conversations you have on a Wednesday when you plan on having this play on like a Friday. Or maybe the same day. But my point being, they're outside of the bedroom. They're not in that moment. So scripted scenes with an out of control scene is, this is A, B, C, D. This is what we're going to do. And then E in the middle is going to be something that you're not expecting, that I'm going to do to you, or, I don't want to expect it. I want you to do something to me. And that's going to last for X number of minutes, maybe, right? It can be a timer, it can be a whatever. And then it's going to go back to something safe and consensual that feels a little bit different for you. So it gives this, unknown to the scene, because you're like, ooh, I don't know what's coming, and I don't know when it's coming, and I don't know what's going to happen. So you have a little bit of that fear, a little bit of that anxiety that you really love, that you really want. But at the same time, that it's only going to be a portion of it, and then it's going to be over and you're going to have control over it again. So you get the thrill of it with safety and then some choreography as well. And then helpless fantasies that focus on powerlessness and not pain, right? So blindfolds are really great. You don't have to struggle. You don't have to force anything. It's just a suggestion of not being able to be stopped, but you actually can stop it at any point. So this just builds anticipation slowly. So you want to focus on like teasing touch, different words, saying things to your partner, or having your partner say things to you like, oh, you can't get out of this, can you? You wish you could get out of this, don't you? Things like that. So that's a really easy one. And then kind of my favorite is mindfuckery. And we don't talk about this one a lot, because when we talk about CNC, it's always physical things. But the mindfuck that comes with somebody either, controlling the way that the narrative goes, or, how you're feeling about yourself in that day, this is so fucking dicey, because like in a regular healthy relationship, we're generally told that like gaslighting and all of this shit is terrible. But sometimes if we're playing this role and we're in this play, this mindfuckery and this moment is something that we really desire, and something that like we really want, right? Anticipation is also a big thing. So something like, I'm going to do something to you later, but you won't know when. And then maybe when your partner comes home, maybe they don't actually do anything to you at all. So it leaves you going, when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? And then you say something like, I thought you were going to do something to me. And then they go, you wish I was going to do something to you. And then you're like, no, but you said you were going to do something to me. And they're like, sit down. We are not doing anything tonight. And you're like, oh my God, but I was expecting it all day. That mindfucker, you're like, oh my God. In a normal relationship, you'd be so mad. And you're still kind of mad, but mad in a really fucking hot way. Because you're like, oh God damn, okay. Like that was that little bit of mindfuckery. It creates that tension and surrender over time, but like not with force, but with anticipation, right? So it's not always about the body. Sometimes it's so much more about your nervous system and how that reacts. So a lot of people really enjoy CNC play because it fires up their nervous system, but then afterwards, there is still always aftercare. Right? So there's always that moment afterwards where you come back together, you debrief about what happened, you have a conversation, you feel safe again. You're never really just left unless, and I know it's going to come to a shocker for a lot of people, but that is part of some people's aftercare when it comes to CNC is, no, I want you to leave me. I want to be left to my own devices. I want to continue feeling this, sensation in my nervous system, and I want to self-soothe. I mean, to each their own, but you'll have those conversations with your partner. So then, aftercare is this moment where you sit in any sexual situation, honestly, but, us cis hetero vanilla folk have called it pillow talk our whole lives, which still doesn't really exist in a lot of relationships like that. And sex is just like wham, bam, and then a rollover and a sleep. So it doesn't happen anyway, but aftercare is something you guys are all going to do now. And that really is just a debrief. How was that? How did you feel? What did you like? What did you not like? This is what I liked. This is what I didn't like. This is what I thought I was going to like, and I really didn't. What do you need right now? Do you need a cuddle? Do you need silence? Do you need a movie? Do you want some water? Do you want a scotch? Do you want a shower? Do you want a sandwich? Like what's going on? What do we want to do? Do we want to have some space away from each other for a minute and then kind of come back? Do we want to scroll our phones and just fucking dissociate for a minute and like kind of come back to the world around us? Whatever that is, you're going to have your partner and yourself kind of coexist in that space and co-regulate each other's nervous systems back to where we were. Because, in all of this conversation, we've kind of talked about how like the submissive is going to be the one who's experiencing all of these things. But any dominant in this position or top, anybody actually performing and executing the play and the things that are happening, especially in CNC, they can go into what's called dom drop, top drop. They can really feel pretty shitty about themselves afterwards because, again, it's still something that society doesn't deem as, quote, appropriate, right? So it's still there can still be a lot of shame in wanting to perform those things on somebody, in wanting to see somebody in so much pain or struggle, in wanting to put that anticipation on people. So sitting with your top, your dom, your person and saying, how are you feeling? Like, are you okay with what you just did? Are you okay with how that went down? I really liked this part. I want you to know how safe I feel with you, things like that. So there's lots of different ways. And then we can have sub drop as well, where the person who is experiencing it is going to kind of drop out just a little bit. We have a lot of adrenaline flowing through your bodies, both parties, all parties. A lot of hormones are coming. It takes a little while for those things to come back to play. A little fun fact that we don't really talk about a whole lot is after almost any sort of sexual encounter, we all have hormones that are going to be spiked and raised in our bodies. And vasopressin is one that's going to be spiked in the male biologically in males, and in females, it's our oxytocin. And a couple of others, again, adrenaline, endorphins, and things like that. But the idea is it takes about 24 to 48 hours for those to regulate again in a good day, like in a good nervous system that can regulate itself really well, and like a body that wants to go back to homeostasis. So after you've had that time with a partner, it's what we hear a lot, like the joke that we would hear or the way it's talked about is, he just shuts off and wants to go to sleep. And it's like, he doesn't even care about me. And she is clingy and she's calling me all the time. And oh my God, I had a one night stand and she just keeps calling me like we're together all the time. Like there's these two different hormones. So vasopressin actually suppresses our bonding chemicals. So vasopressin in males, the idea is, back in the caveman days, it would shut you off from that. You've now procreated. It will shut you off for being all gooey. And the vasopressin makes you kind of like go to sleep and rest so that then you can get up and go. And what we say today is we have post-nut clarity. That's how it's usually kind of talked about. It's like, oh my God, I was so horny and I did all these things. And then I did the thing and I nutted and I was like, fuck, I got to get out of here. So like that's your vasopressin. So sometimes we have to override that and be like, you know what? Aftercare. We need to stick around for a little bit, bud. Like hang out a little bit. Now on the oxytocin side of it, as a woman, I'm not going to get into the whole, because people will come at me, but I'm not going to get into the whole, like every person you have sex with leaves their DNA in your body and your energy and you're siphoning your energy, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to do that, but we're going to talk about biology and science. And the idea is the oxytocin spikes, which is your bonding chemical. It is your bonding hormone. You can bond with your bestie. You can bond with your mom. You can bond with your babies. You can also bond with a sexual partner. That spikes, and it takes about 48 hours to 72 hours for some people for that to come back down to normal levels. Therefore, your nervous system goes, you're my baby daddy. You're my caveman for life. You're the person that I'm going to be with. You're my safety net. You're my. And it just takes a minute. So I like to tell the women in my life specifically that if you're going to go out and do your casual sex, which is fantastic, right? What do we say? Casual sex is great. Casual sex, not callous sex, right? So we can have a lot of fun, but we don't have to be callous and cold about it. We just need to have understanding and education around how we all react. So I tell my girlies that if you're planning on going out on the night, on the town, first of all, have your hoe bag packed. A little baggie with your little undies and your lip gloss and your mascara and all of your lubes and your condoms and all of your things. Make sure you put a pleasure pod in your hoe bag at all times. It's good for everything and for your lip gloss too. So anyways, we're going to do that. Also have plans. Have plans the next day. If you plan on going out and hoeing around on Thursday, Friday night, make sure you have brunch on Saturday with the girls, or you're going to a movie on Sunday with your auntie, or you're doing something. Okay. Make sure you have plans, because that way it's going to keep you either bonded to somebody else, but it's going to keep you distracted a little bit so that your hormones can go back to normal without you feeling that gut-wrenching feeling. Because I'm not like, it is the truth. I mean, some of us know, and that's totally cool, like whatever. But when we do feel it, it's real. it's real, okay? It's not real. Like, you're not madly in love with that person, but the feeling that you are is real, and there's a reason for it, okay? If you're the male in this, you have vasopressin, you have testicles, you have a penis, you have testosterone. If you're that human and you wake up the next day and you're kind of like, get away from me, or I gotta go, or I gotta run, or I gotta whatever, so normal in your body. But what I'm asking you to do is override that and understand that maybe you do need to stick around for a little aftercare, a little phone call the next day. Hey, how'd you do? Look, I'm still doing, you can't see me, but I'm still doing the old school phone with like the rotary phone. I don't do the pad yet. I'm still like ear and mouth. Anyway, pick up the phone and call, or just text and be like, hey, had a really great night last night. Thank you so much. Maybe I'll give you a call on such and such a day, or, maybe we can hang out next weekend, something, right? Just kind of like keep people in the loop about what's going on. Okay. So our next question is, I have a girlfriend who really wants me to choke her. This is not something I'm into at all. And to be honest, I'm terrified of doing it wrong. What are the safe ways to choke someone? I love this question. Thank you so much for actually being a person who wants to do this. So choking is becoming such a cool, trendy thing to do. And I'm super happy because, it can be a lot of fun for a lot of people, but it also can be terrifying that you're putting your hands around somebody's neck. And we think, because of media, TV, movies, porn, that this is supposed to be done in one way, and it's not the way. Okay. All right. This is so hard to explain with just words. So go to YouTube and look up Intimacy Unlocked and watch us. Okay. Listen, in your throat, in your esophagus, okay, not your esophagus, but it's your trachea, but in your throat going straight down, you have your trachea, that's your windpipe. Okay. So let's use language everybody knows. You have a windpipe, and on your windpipe, you have like a little nodule. A lot of people who were born men will have a Adam's apple there, and some of us will not, but you still have this little bone in there, and it's really, really delicate. Okay. It's right in the middle of your neck. And when you put your fingers on it, it's where you can feel your throat vibrating. So it's kind of like right in the middle of your throat where like your Adam's apple would be. So when people are choking people, what they think they're supposed to be doing is cutting off that air supply. So putting your hand right on somebody's neck, underneath their chin, directly in front of them, right on the anterior side of their neck, and pushing back. That's not what we want to do for sexual choking. That's not what we do for what's called erotic asphyxiation. Okay. I've always had a hard time saying that word, but that's not what we want to do. The idea behind choking is not cutting off air supply necessarily. It's about cutting off the blood supply to the brain so that you feel a euphoric feeling of faintness. Okay. And the way we do that is we put our hands on either side of our partner's neck. So your hand is still on their neck, but you're squeezing rather than pushing. So instead of pushing, let's say you're the one doing it, because this is the question. Let's say your partner is lying down on the bed on a pillow and you're on top of her, and you put your hand on her neck, where her neck now is right in the crevice of your thumb and your forefinger, and you're pushing down toward the pillow. Wrong. Do not do that. You can place your hand gently on her neck and then squeeze to the sides on either side, almost not right under her ears, but around under her ears. And what you're doing is cutting off the carotid arteries. And that's the arteries that are going to cause the blood to kind of go up to your brain. So what we're doing is we're slicing off that blood supply so that we get that little faint euphoric feeling that's going on. The biggest problem that we're having in the world of sexual education is that people are going in and actually cutting off the trachea and breaking those little bones and really harming people because we don't see any difference when we're watching it on porn and media. But I'm here to tell you that that's not how you do it. So what you want to do is just put your hand very gently on, not even on their throat, but kind of like on their collarbone if your hand is big enough. And then just kind of squeeze the sides of their neck. So what you'll kind of notice is maybe their face gets a little purpley, a little red. You can kind of see like the tension building in them. But the whole time, they should be able to breathe relatively normally. They should be able to make noise. They should be able to tell you to stop. Now, again, with choking though, we're not going to necessarily rely on a safe word, but we do need to rely on a safe something. So is it a tap? Do you have your clicker? Is it, do you use your feet? What is it? Do you have a pillow behind you? Some people have a certain pillow on their bed or a certain something on their bed that they grab. And when they've touched that certain something, their partners know to stop what they're doing. So you need to have another action when you're doing something like choking, because you may not be able to speak at all, especially if you're back onto your partner. Let's say you're in doggy and your partner's wrapped around you, holding your neck like that. They can't even see your face and like your eyes pleading for anything. You actually have to do something else. So you can do a reach around with a tap, tap, tap. X number of taps means you need to stop. I joked around with a partner one night and I was like, if I kick you in the balls, you should probably just stop. But that's not really what I meant. But the idea is, you need to give somebody some kind of indication. I think that choking is a really fun way to incorporate some, BDSM and some impact. But you do need to do it really carefully, and you can do it really slowly. I think that's what I actually like about choking. The idea of choking is that you don't have to go in full force right away. You could actually just put your hand on your partner's neck and not do anything, like not push, not squeeze, nothing. And just the psychological component of having something on their neck might be enough for her to be like, ooh, this is cool, right? It's just you kind of taking that control. So, your girlfriend wants you to choke her. So maybe try something like that. Maybe when she's on top, if she's ever on top, another way to do it is to reach up and grab her throat. And that way she can lean into you as much as she wants to or not, or kind of ask you, squeeze harder or do something, but she's then in control of what's happening. So that's another really fun way to kind of try to do something like that. But, hear me when I say this very, very loudly. Do not push on somebody's throat. That is not how we do this, okay? We want to squeeze on either side. And even when you squeeze, you want to go really, really gently and slowly at first and just see where your partner is, because they can pass out. They can pass out. And then, there's a whole lot of other things that are going on. You never want to, I don't want to say you never, because everybody's going to have their own limits. But I would suggest maybe that your limit be not to have your partner passing out if that's not something that you guys have talked about extensively and had an emergency plan before you went into that. Now, guys, talking about kink and BDSM and different ways of relating, it kind of touches on a lot of soft spots with me. I don't really get into too much truly deeply personal things on here. And it's not that I don't want to. I think it's just because this is all about your questions and the things that are going on with you. But what I really want to do right now is talk about something that clients come to me a lot about. And that is, what happens when I have a kink or a fetish or something that I want to participate in, and my partner really doesn't want to play with me in that way. And I feel like it's not just a fun thing for me, like it really is part of my identity. So I touched on this earlier in the episode when I said, fetishes are things we need to be aroused. But you can have a kink in your life that is also intertwined into your personality. So you can be aroused by other things 100% if it's not there. But because this kink is not there, you can still also feel this really deep sense of grief and longing for something. And we're not really told that we're supposed to be able to feel sad about that. If your partner doesn't want it, then you should just be like, okay, well, we can find a compromise. Okay, well, maybe if we can't, that's something that you do need to kind of grieve over. I wrote down a lot of thoughts on this, and I would like to read them. And, it is something that has stuck with me my whole life, really. I've told the story hundreds of times at this point now, where people say, well, how did you get into this? Like, how did you even get starting to talk about sex? And I've been interested in sexual behavior and relational behavior since I was a child, and at age appropriate levels, but I was so into it. And I knew there was something different about me. And I knew that the things I wanted to talk about and the things that I loved, not everybody loved. And it was a really dicey place to be as a woman, a young woman, wanting to A, have sex, and B, talk about that sex, and then C, debrief about that sex and be like, what did you like about it? What did you not? And when you're a teenager, like, that doesn't happen. And I wish it did. And I hope it does from now on, but it kind of didn't for me. And I realized at a young age that I liked things that other people considered really taboo. And anyway, so you know what? I'm just going to start reading because this was something that mattered a lot to me. I have to put my old lady readers on again. So give me a second. I love this age of my life where I get to wear glasses like all the time. Okay, so here we go. We don't talk enough about what it's like to want something sexually that your partner doesn't or won't give you. We tiptoe around it. We rationalize. We tell ourselves, it's not a big deal, or at least we have a good relationship. And yeah, maybe you do. Maybe you have love and history and comfort. You have family and friendships and safety. But deep down inside, something is missing. Not because the other person failed. Not because the other person failed. Not because you're insatiable or needy or too much or too big or too loud, but because your erotic self, the part of you that burns and imagines and aches and wants, is just not being met. And that unmet desire, it doesn't vanish. It burrows, much like any trauma in our bodies. It finds a space to live. It hides in your body. It shows up as irritability or numbness, disconnection or resentment. Sometimes it shows up as overworking, distracting yourself, or underfeeling, or dissociating, or scrolling until your skin feels thin. And sometimes it shows up as grief. Real, aching, embodied grief for the version of yourself you're not allowed to express. Desire is not just sexual, it's existential. Desire is about more than just getting off. It's about being seen, being known, being allowed to exist in your full, unapologetic self and feeling safe. My hero, psychologist and author Esther Perel once said, eroticism is the antidote to death. Eroticism is the antidote to death. And I think she's right. Because when we're in our desire, when we are fully turned on, we are fully alive. There's something electric in us, something animal, but something sacred. When that part of you is denied, not by accident, but as a sustained pattern in your relationship, it's a slow death of your erotic truth. Now, to be clear, erotic incompatibility is not abuse, it's not betrayal, it's not a character flaw, it's just a difference. But that doesn't mean it's painless. Sometimes the hardest heartbreak is the one that nobody else sees. So what do you do when the person you love can't meet you where your desires live? This is the question so many people are quietly carrying, and clients in my practice and listeners in my inbox even, and friends over wine, people who feel like they're standing at the edge of a cliff in their relationship, wondering if this difference in desire means the whole thing has to fall apart. The truth is, it doesn't always. You can't bypass the grief though. You have to let yourself feel it. Grieve the version of your sexuality you're not expressing. Grieve the kink or the longing or edge you thought would someday be shared. Grieve the partner you hoped they'd be. Let that sadness move through you because, you've not failed, but because something deeply personal is going unfulfilled. And grief, when we let it move, it clears space. It doesn't fix the mismatch, but it makes room for clarity. So what now, right? People say, well, okay, cool, great. We can talk about that, but what now? Well, you talk. You speak your truth, not to manipulate or shame, but to reveal. Something like, this part of me feels essential, like my essence. I'm not asking you to change. I'm not asking you to change overnight. I'm asking you to see me, to witness me, to understand how much this matters to me. And then you breathe and you listen and you let them have their own process because your truth might be confronting for them too. It might bring up their fear and insecurity and guilt. Let them be human and keep being human yourself. This last full moon just like cracked me open, the Scorpio full moon. And if anybody is in my life, you know that I have just been brutally honest with you. And from there, you can get curious. Is there a way to express this desire in smaller doses? You know, we talked a lot about that today on the podcast. Like, how can we express kinks and things in smaller doses? Where can we compromise? Is there room for fantasy, even if not full participation? You know, can we talk? Can we share stories about maybe what it could look like? Could solo play or guided visualizations or kink journaling offer some form of nourishment for you? You know, where can you find that? Maybe it even opens up a conversation about ethical non-monogamy or kink community spaces, if that feels right for you. I just found out actually that there's a space for people who like to participate in rope play with trusted, safe community. And I think that's amazing. But you know, sometimes it is a deal breaker, and that's okay too. You know, choosing your erotic wholeness doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. So the final truth that I have decided to share with you is you deserve to be fully met. You deserve a space, whether with a partner, with yourself, or in your own private pleasure practice, where you don't have to fragment your sexual self to keep the peace. That doesn't mean you get everything you want on command. That's not intimacy. That's fantasy. But it does mean that your longings matter, that your sexual identity deserves to be lived and not just fantasized. And if that makes things complicated, well, welcome to the real world of adult relationships. So let yourself grieve. Let yourself want. Let yourself speak. You are not too much. You are not broken. You're just awake. And that is a beautiful, powerful thing. Okay. Thank you for listening to all of my inner, deepest, and darkest thoughts, everybody. I appreciate that time and space. I've struggled with this a lot over my life, and I've had to navigate relationships my entire life around this in some capacity, whether it was, you know, sexual or just ways that I wanted to experience adventure and eroticism in my life in different ways. And I've always loved to push boundaries, and that's where I find my power. And I had my partner sit with me a couple of weeks ago and actually say those words to me. He said, Serena, I know that you find your power in rebellion, and I need to be that person who's going to support you in that power, even though I know it's going to be challenging for me. So I feel very lucky to have partners in my life who understand how big I need to be loved. And I think that everybody out there deserves to be loved in their bigness, you know, in their wholeness and in their fullness. But the challenge is, it's up to you to be big. It is up to you to show your bigness and to show your truth. Because if you keep staying small, then you can't be mad at them for only loving you small, right? So let's just end today by saying thank you for listening to the Intimacy Unlocked podcast. Stay big. You don't deserve to be small. And if you need somebody to love you big, I will love you big. Thank you for listening to the Intimacy Unlocked podcast, where I'm unlocking your pleasure one question at a time. The key is already in your hands. Are you ready to turn it? Intimacy Unlocked is hosted by me, Serena Haynes, your everything to do with sex coach, produced by Sarah McClellan, and supported by the Pleasure Pods.